Okay. Thank you all. I'm delighted to be here. NATO does have a number of organizational challenges. And like everybody else, I have challenge with the advancing. Okay. We do have many challenges, and many of them are not technical. Political challenges, where nations choose not to be interoperable for various reasons. Resource issues, where nations commit different amounts of funding to improving interoperability. We also experience problems with silos or different communities of interest, such as logistics or medical community or the intelligence community. They all have different needs and different silos and lack of interoperability. And even when we do have standards to define technical interoperability, we run into issues with configuration options and different nations configuring things differently. I've got a number of different humorous stories about each of these, but in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the results, the areas where we've actually made some progress, how we're addressing the latter two, the different communities of interest and some of the technical issues. Okay, next slide. So the first thing we do to deal with the different communities of interest, we first decided we needed a common language. So in the communications community, which is where I come from, we established what we call a communications taxonomy, where we identify, starting with the OSI model, the 7-layer OSI model, we identify standards and services for networking and for communications services and applications above that. And then we go beyond that. In the higher layers, we have communities of interest services and applications. We have the information and data domain. And then above the very top, we have the business processes, the operational domain, as we call it. This is based on a service-oriented architecture, and it gives us ability to go to the different communities of interest and talk a common language. And I'll talk more about how we use that in my latter slides. To address some of the other issues as far as standards, we've emphasized the idea of profiles, where we assemble a set of standards into a single profile, along with a number of different configuration settings and instructions that can be used in that profile so that we can try and force interoperability in our communications. This is a very simple example of a domain name service, a networking standard, networking profile that lists a number of different commercial standards or could be NATO-specific standards. But then we also included different implementation instructions for how we're going to use this DNS, maybe in a mobile environment or in a temporary command center. So this profile then, once we establish that profile, then we place that back on the same taxonomy, and it shows up in here in the infrastructure layer of our technical domain. We've expanded that concept, and here you can see a number of different profiles. Each one of these green boxes indicates a small profile that we've established, listing a bunch of standards for a specific purpose. And nested in the larger profiles, in this case called the Federated Mission Networking Profile, which is a concept that we can use to establish interoperability between nations for day zero communications, we call it. When we have to go on a mission, we want different nations to be able to come with their networks already pre-programmed, already loaded up with these different profiles and the configuration instructions, so that when they hit the ground, they're going to be able to interoperate. We just connect them up and they should work. Now, this requires, of course, a whole lot of testing in the laboratory or through exercises, which is a key point of making this interoperability work. So this interoperability, we need it in both the horizontal and the vertical dimensions. In the horizontal, it's between nation to nation or organization to nations. And you can see that with the blue diamonds. But then we also want to have vertical interoperability. We need profiles to get ourselves up through that stack of communications through that OSI model and through on to the other layers of the taxonomy stack. Oh, I think we missed a slide somewhere. Okay, well, I will just skip ahead. Okay, so how do we use some of this interoperability and this taxonomy, as I mentioned? We use this common language to go to the different communities of interest and have our architects, our communications architects, sit down next to the communities of interest subject matter experts so that we can identify what information processes and information needs those communities of interest have. We can try and break down some of these silos, some of these stovepipes of architecture by trying to establish an enterprise architecture. We sit down with these subject matter experts to identify their business processes. For example, here in the logistics community, I might have a process for ordering equipment or a process for tracking equipment through arriving through a theater. And that process starts with some business needs at the very top, then it's got some information needs, some data needs, and then below that you might have some community of interest applications, some very custom applications made specifically for the logistics community. But we want to orient them toward the more common enterprise applications and the core services that we're enabling for the entire enterprise. So by sitting down as enterprise architects, we are able to get those subject matter experts in the silos to work with us and try and get away from their custom applications and services. We can also use this taxonomy, this common language, to identify capabilities and services that exist today. We show these in blue and yellow on the left, and where we want to get in the future, so that we can conduct a gap analysis, so we can identify what capabilities we need to build, what services we need to build, what profiles, what blocks of architecture we need to establish, so that we can get to where we want to be in the future. A final piece that we're using, and this I think I'm not showing the slide, is architecture building blocks, where we take the idea of the profiles and then we add some more contextual information around that and establish an architecture building block that is also modular, reusable, and it's also mapped to the same taxonomy. So it's got profiles and standards mapped to it, configuration settings, identifies use cases. This enables rapid construction and of small functionality pieces. It enables reuse of commercial off-the-shelf products or existing code. For instance, a mapping application like a Google Maps, we reuse that for the logistics tracking applications, for example, instead of the logistics community building their own mapping function. So try to get that interoperability through these kind of ways. It helps the program managers who need to build a new system. For instance, a manager needs to build a mobile command and control center, knows he's going to need to build a video teleconferencing system. He's going to need a knowledge wall system. He's going to need a geospatial system. And you can just grab those architecture building blocks and their subsequent profiles that are already defined, pop those into his either specification for contractors, or just reuse the existing systems that are already there even better. And in that way, enable interoperability in the long term. So that is our approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Trace. I have a question for you, but if you want, you can come back here and take it. And by the way, please, you're welcome to applaud for him while he goes. Trace, I'd asked you to speak about the problems of organizational interoperability, and you actually spoke very eloquently about some very innovative solutions that you had come up with. I'm wondering if you could take all of that and summarize it in one or two lines. What's the secret sauce? What was it you did that helped you to break down these silos and get interoperability in areas where it wasn't necessarily easy to deliver?
Well, let me reduce the illusion. First of all, we have not succeeded yet. We are in the infancy. But as I said, the common language of the profiles mapped to the common language of the taxonomy, it gives us that framework that we can establish an enterprise architecture on the communications side. And then from that enterprise architecture, then we can now go and evangelize that with the communications architects to go to these different communities of interest and show them the benefits that we're getting on the communication side and the benefits that they can receive then in their different silos.
That's the theme I've heard in several presentations today, the need for a common language, common definition, so that we at least know that we're talking about the same thing when we do. Please come and join us back here. You've earned a seat on the stage and a bit of a rest before we take questions.